Welcome to the JCPS MTSS training on the Classroom Systems Toolkit with a focus on the application Group Contingencies. I am Melissa Loxton, MTSS Engagement Resource Teacher with Zone 3.
And I'm Kelly Hagan, MTS Engagement Resource Teacher with the Middle School Zone.
Please take a moment to write down or type the case-sensitive bit.ly into your web browser. This will allow you access to the slide deck and all the links for future reference. These are the components of MTSS, multi-tiered systems of support. As you can see, MTSS provides multiple levels of support for all learners and aligns resources and support with our district's 6 systems for students and for teachers who deliver and support instruction. MTSS addresses academic, social, emotional, and behavioral development. It focuses on overall school improvement that is sustainable. JCPS has 3 departments within MTSS, as shown on this concept map. MTSS Academics, directed by Donna Lawson, supports schools by ensuring teachers are providing all students with academic supports, with a focus on Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions and support. MTSS Behavior Department, directed by Sandra Hensel, supports schools in implementing school-wide behavior systems and frameworks, including positive behavior interventions and supports, PBIS, and the Behavior Support Systems Model, which is an alignment of PBIS and restorative practices. Our department is MTSS Engagement, directed by Dr. Naomi Brahim. The goal of the MTSS Engagement Department is to increase student achievement by equipping teachers with high-yield pedagogical practices to maximize student engagement. 6 MTSS toolkits were created to provide resources for Tier 1 instructional practices to increase student engagement, reduce student behaviors, and to decrease disproportionality. Here are the 6 MTSS toolkits. By clicking the toolkit image, you will access the MTSS department webpage and each toolkit. Classroom systems that support student behavior use academic and behavior data to put short and long-term supports in place to help students be successful. When we think about student-teacher relationships, we are referring to an aspect of classroom systems designed to help students strengthen their sense of belonging. This toolkit is broken into 3 high-yield practices defined by John Hattie as practices teachers can use to move learning forward. All 3 are needed to apply the application Group Contingencies. It is important that you familiarize yourself with these practices prior to using this application. The first high-yield practice is student-teacher relationships. Any educator is said to have good student-teacher relationships when the degree of interactions between themselves and the student end positively. This is easily seen in classrooms with positive environments and few problem behaviors. Remember, the bulk of the work is on the teacher to cultivate and maintain this positive relationship. The next high-yield practice is classroom management. In this practice, teachers set roles and expectations, sometimes with the aid of students, and then use positive strategies to have students adhere with the roles. These roles should be reasonable based on grade level, and the outcomes of teacher and student interactions should be positive. Having good classroom management is a major indicator of student success. The third high-yield practice involves teacher expectations of performance. Teachers who believe that their students can succeed have a great impact not only on academic success, but behavioral success as well. In order to have high expectations, teachers should voice these independently of the school-wide expectations, emphasize growth and progress in their expectations, regularly communicate these expectations, give students reasonable challenges, encourage the student that they can be successful, and give regular feedback on student progress. Teacher expectations can be applied to the whole class or, if necessary, to individual students after being modified for their needs. So what do we mean when we say group contingencies? Well, think of it as an all-for-one mindset. Group contingencies can be an effective strategy for managing group behavior. Group contingencies can be used to promote a number of behaviors. The key behind group contingencies are the concepts of teamwork and peer pressure through reinforcement. Like I said, all for one. Before we dive into more specifics of the group contingencies, let's talk about tiered or layered supports. Notice the graphic on the slide showing the various levels of support, starting with Tier 1 for all students being the foundation. Tier 2 supports layered on top and provided in addition to Tier 1 for a small percentage of students, with Tier 3 layered on both of these and provided for an even smaller percentage of students. Our focus for today's training, group contingencies, is considered a Tier 2 support or intervention. It should be considered with a small percentage of students, as needed, that need further support after trying Tier 1 strategies or interventions. Teachers know they are successful in the application of group contingencies when positive behaviors are promoted through the use of teamwork and peer pressure. In this training, we will learn how to manage classroom behavior by using the group contingency strategy. You will brainstorm and share ways you can implement group contingencies to decrease problematic behaviors. To effectively implement group contingencies, here are some key steps. 1. Identify a target behavior to increase or decrease. Keep in mind that all students must be able to perform this target behavior. 2. Make plans for implementation. Develop a contingency for success that is very reasonable to facilitate. Determine the reinforcement to be used for the entire group, and match consequences to function if possible. 3. Teach to students. Define and model the key behaviors, both positive and negative. Teach the criteria for success and promote as a team-based activity. Step 4. Monitor and record progress to determine whether target behavior occurs more or less often. And finally, fade group contingencies back to simple teacher praise of target behavior. Here we see some tips for effectively implementing group contingencies. Put one group contingency in place in one classroom in one context. Monitor the success of the entire contingency. Then, if it is working, you can increase the expectation. You want to keep track of your reminders. Try and see if you can increase prompts as the group contingency begins and then decrease later. In order to increase effectiveness, here are some tips and considerations. Purposely and strategically group students who work well together. Ensure you deliver positive behavior, specific praise, while also avoid calling out specific students or challenging behaviors. Great job working quietly and together, Group 3 is an example. Structure the classroom to support group contingencies. Increase your class buy-in by changing reinforcers often and keeping your students' preferences in mind. Implement a different type, such as dependent, independent, or interdependent of group contingency. Also, be aware of the potential for an individual student to feel positive peer pressure from other group members, or for an individual to sabotage their group's responses.
This video will provide a deeper dive into group contingencies.
Hi, my name is Mabel Oberon and I'm a board certified behavior analyst with Brett Denovi & Associates. In this video, I'll be talking to you about group contingencies. I'd first like to mention positive behavior interventions and supports, or PBIS. Positive behavior interventions and supports are interventions used to address problem behavior by preventing the behavior and teaching appropriate replacement skills. Their interventions are tiered into hierarchies to address primary, secondary, and tertiary prevention, which are also referred to as Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. Primary prevention is generally targeted school-wide or classroom-wide and addresses the majority of the total student body. Secondary prevention targets groups of students who may be considered at risk. A tertiary prevention targets individuals usually with an individualized behavior plan. Group contingencies can be utilized as part of the PBIS model to prevent problem behaviors and teach appropriate replacement skills. A group contingency is when reinforcement for all members of the group is dependent on the behavior of a person within the group, a select group of members within a larger group, or each member of the group meeting a performance criteria. Group contingencies are an effective way to promote cooperation and improve behavior. There are three types of group contingencies: dependent, independent, and interdependent. Dependent group contingencies are also known as a hero procedure. In this type of contingency, reinforcement for all members of a group is dependent on the behavior of one member of the group, or the behavior of a select group of members within a larger group. In an independent group contingency, reinforcement for each member of the group is dependent on the person meeting a performance criteria that is in effect for all members of the group. The advantage of this type of contingency plan is that it holds each individual responsible for meeting the specified criteria. It motivates each student to keep up with the rest of the group in order to earn the reward. In an interdependent group contingency, reinforcement for all members of the group is dependent on each member of the group meeting a performance criteria that is in effect for all members of the group. Like the dependent group contingency, the interdependent program capitalizes on peer influence, as group members are likely to encourage each other to earn the reward. The good behavior game is an example of an interdependent group contingency. This involves dividing a group into teams and offering a reward contingent upon behavior exhibited by everyone on the team. Instead of earning rewards for good behavior, each team earns strikes against it for any problematic behaviors exhibited by any one of its team members. The team with the fewest strikes earns a reward. Some guidelines to implement group contingencies are to conduct a reinforcer assessment. Some common rewards at school include special privileges, recognition, and tangible items. Some common rewards in the workplace include cash rewards, paid time off, paid lunch, and an extended lunch hour. The second is to select behaviors targeted for either increase and/or decrease. Then, develop a criteria for when rewards will be delivered and goals will be met. Next, combine with other interventions if it's appropriate. Select the appropriate group contingency that would be dependent, independent, or interdependent. Then collect data and make changes accordingly. Some advantages of group contingencies is that they save time, they lighten the workload for teachers and staff, they facilitate teamwork within a group, they're practical to use, they encourage peer influences as encouragement, support, and motivation. Some disadvantages to group contingencies: that there may be sabotage to prevent a group from receiving a reward. Bullying may occur towards members of the group who are responsible for the group not earning the reward. There may be peer pressure to behave inappropriately, like participate in bullying. Scapegoating of an individual, there may be some coercion, and it may not be effective for individuals who require that Tier 2 and Tier 3 level of intervention. To mitigate the disadvantages, such as bullying, one may consider the use of an individual reinforcement contingency instead, to avoid potentially reinforcing students for engaging in bullying behaviors. Another recommendation may be to use self-monitoring along with the group contingencies. Although group contingencies are commonly used in classroom settings, they can be utilized in other environments as well. For example, in the Brown-Redmond article, group contingencies were implemented to reduce staff use of unscheduled sick leave. In the article, the researchers implemented a group contingency with direct care workers that required the employees to meet a specified criteria to be eligible for a drawing for prizes such as $20 in cash, 4 hours of paid time off, paid lunch with a supervisor, or movie tickets at a local theater. The mean number of unscheduled sick hours was reduced during this intervention. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to disseminate the science, share this video, and please follow us on YouTube. Bye.
Within the video, it was described that group contingencies are used as a reinforcement for all members of a group which is dependent on the behavior of a person, select members, or the group as a whole. Group contingencies promote cooperation and can improve behavior. There are 3 types of group contingencies: dependent, independent, and interdependent, all of which are most effective when paired when an additional strategy, such as the good behavior game or token economy. As mentioned before, the 3 types of group contingencies are dependent, independent, and interdependent. The dependent group's contingency is when the behavior of one member affects the outcome for all other members. This type of strategy is not recommended since it singles out specific students within the class. Independent group contingencies reinforce the behavior for all members of the group, which typically motivates each individual to meet the criteria to achieve the reward. The interdependent group contingency capitalizes on peer influence to encourage one another to achieve the reward. An example of a group contingency is a points game. First, teams and rules must be established, such as how many teams, individuals, small group, or whole class. What positive behaviors are you trying to reinforce? What length of time must the students have to achieve the reward? Some things to consider depends on the relationship with your students. Presenting points publicly or having them displayed may only work for certain students, but not all. Be sure to focus on the replacement behavior to maintain a positive atmosphere. Some things to consider when implementing a group contingency is to be sure that all students are capable of completing or they have scaffolds in place. Be sure to teach exactly what is expected to replace the misbehavior. Avoid using this strategy with students that relish negative peer attention. As always, start with smaller expectations and scale up as students become more successful. When implementing new strategies into the classroom, one should always consider different student backgrounds and the overall classroom culture. Teachers that approach their behavior management systems through a lens of equity removes the barriers for learning, such that a class community is established where everyone plays an important role in the learning that occurs. When implementing interventions for students with exceptional needs, be sure to first reference their IEP to ensure that interventions are in place and being followed. Also, look into starting a functional behavioral assessment, or an FBA, to collect data on when the behavior occurs, the antecedent, what the behavior is, and what the consequences for the behavior will be. Students need to be empowered to be more independent learners and take an active role in their learning process. With group contingencies, teachers give students the opportunity to monitor their own behavior in order to receive a reward with their peers. When structures that promote learners to have an active role in their learning process, collaboration and engagement become the result. Use the following link to access the Behavior Intervention Grid, which provides multiple interventions for various misbehaviors experienced in the classroom. Here are additional resources that will provide more information on group contingencies. Thank you for joining us to learn more about using group contingencies. If you would like more information about the MTSS toolkits and other high-yield practices, please visit our department website.